Hey everyone, John from Stealth Tackle here with a few fall terminal tackle tips for you. We're getting later in the year now, and these fish are chasing larger bait fish. So one thing we do to get after them is we throw bigger baits. As we're throwing bigger baits, one thing to keep in mind is to also think about using heavier terminal tackle when you're using these larger baits. Traditionally earlier in the year, we might be using a little bit lighter stuff to get these lures to react different or get better action out of some of our smaller baits. Now we're getting into the time of year where we're using these bigger lures, and the action of the lure isn't going to be affected so much by the leader, so you're going to want to bulk up on that stuff just to help prevent any sort of failure. The first thing we'll talk about is going to be your braided line. If you're not already using a 100-pound test and you've been using 80, now's the time of year where you might want to think about upping the size on your braided line from 80-pound to a 100-pound test. It's just going to give you that added security of having a heavier line that you're using with these heavier baits, whether you come in contact with the fish that day or not. These bigger baits are putting a lot more stress on your line. Another nice thing, little tip about spooling up in the fall is by spooling up in the fall, you're putting fresh line on your reels, and all of these new braids out of the box have a nice coating on them, and that coating helps with repel water. So as the season goes on, that starts to wear off, and you start noticing that you're absorbing more water onto your line. So if you spooled up in the spring, by the time you're getting to the fall when those temperatures are dropping and you want to keep your hands from getting as wet, that water resistance is pretty much just about gone off of that line. So think about spooling up with new line in the fall versus doing it in the spring, and then you're also ready to go come springtime because you've only got a month or so of use on that line. So just a tip for keeping your hands a little bit drier during these colder days. So something to think about. Now getting into the leaders, if you're a fan of using fluorocarbon and you're typically using a 100 or 130 pound test fluorocarbon throughout the year, when you're starting to get into these bigger lures, one thing you want to think about doing is upsizing that leader from say 100 or 130 to 150 to 200 pound test. It's not so much that we need a 200 pound leader, but what comes along with upsizing, going up in pound test, comes a thicker diameter leader, which is going to give us better abrasion resistance. One of the things that happens in the fall with these bigger profile baits is these fish are they're not chasing around schools of minnow, they're chasing bigger baits that they need to get a kill shot on. So they're headshotting these baits a lot of times late in the fall. When you're getting them in the net, you're seeing just basically the back end of the bait of the lure hanging out of the fish's mouth. So what's happening is they're hitting those baits head first, and sometimes what they're doing is they're scraping that leader before they're even getting to hit the lure. So what you want to do is compensate for that and have a nice heavy leader. Also, if they are doing this, common sense is also going to tell you that maybe that 6 or 9 inch leader that you've been using earlier in the year to help get some of those smaller lures to run right isn't going to cut it. You want to have a nice long, at least 12, 14 inch leader, so if those fish come in head first on it and they're scraping their teeth along that leader, you're going to have just that little bit added extra that's going to help you get that fish to the net. So upsizing your fluorocarbon pound test, as well as going to a little bit longer leader. Now, if you're not a fan of fluorocarbon, we do have an option for you. It used to be it was either fluorocarbon or solid wire. The problem with solid wire with some of these bigger baits can be your traditional dog ball, or so-called, where the leader wraps on the hook and it winds up kicking your leader. So then you got to straighten your leader back out. Well, now you've got a leader that's a little bit weaker. So one thing you can do if you want to stick with solid wire is to upsize that solid wire to from 174 to 240 pound or over. That works. But if you like the flexibility that fluorocarbon gives you, but you don't want to trust the fluorocarbon this time of year. Perfectly understandable. Now you've got this 49 strand 175 pound wire, which a lot of guys started going to, mainly for the reason of what we just talked about with fish headshotting these baits and getting the leader in their mouth. This 175 pound 49 strand is really strong stuff. It's very flexible, so it doesn't kink as easy as a solid wire leader. So you're kind of getting the best of both worlds there. These also work great if you're doing any vertical jigging, where the fish come over the top and hit the lure head first. So 175 pound 49 strand is something to take a look at as an option if you're a little hesitant for the fluorocarbon. Another thing I like to do is make sure I got a split ring on all my lures, and that's just about any time of year. What the split ring does is a couple of things. It actually gives the lure a little more freedom to move around, so you can get a little more better action out of these baits. Also, with your bigger rubber baits, one problem in the past, if you don't have a split ring on the head of the lure, that snap can push against the bait and wind up having the snap pop open, whereas if you have that split ring on there, that's going to help that thing prevent it from opening up on you. Now, if you wanting to have the most secure snap possible, or connection possible, one thing to consider is to go to a solid ring connection. Solid ring connection is going to eliminate, solid ring, and here's your standard snap, if you guys can see that. Solid ring is going to eliminate the snap altogether, so you're not going to have to worry about anything opening up. The drawback to it is that you got to keep a pair of split ring pliers handy, and every time you want to change a bait, you have to basically put the solid ring, connect it to the split ring like so, but now you've got basically a much more secure connection that's not going to open up on you. So something to think about with that as well. All right, so now one lure that I do shy away from fluorocarbon with, and that is the bigger swim baits. The bigger swim baits, I prefer to have a solid wire with a solid ring connection to a split ring. Again, you got to make sure you have a split ring on these lures. But what this leader does with this style of lure is it lets it get its full action that it's intended to get. You can still use it with any standard musky leader, but if you want to get the full potential action out of these lures, that solid wire just seems like it gives it a little bit better wobble and movement and vibration to it. So with your swim baits, I prefer to stick. They are a little bit more leader sensitive than your other rubber baits, and again, you could use any of the other leaders with it, but I think you're going to get the best action out of it with a solid wire connection. So jerk baits, again, bigger jerk baits, twitch baits, minnow baits, any of that stuff, I like a solid wire connection. But again, if you're traditionally using a 174 or 124 pound wire earlier in the year with some of the smaller size lures to get better action out of them, these bigger baits are not as leader sensitive, so you can upsize that. Think about coming up to a 240 or like on a dive and rise, even over 300 pound test. All those leaders are going to do is add weight, and especially with your dive and rise, they're actually helping you achieve more depth. So going heavier on those style of lures is not going to hurt anything. It's actually probably going to help you get a little bit deeper, so something to think about. You can still use your lighter wire leaders, however, again, like we talked about with the rubber baits, if that leader hangs up on these bigger, heavier jerk baits or glide baits, it's going to kick it a lot easier because those are a lot heavier lures. So you're going to have to straighten that out. Again, you've got a weaker leader, or you're going to have to change it out altogether. So think about upsizing that solid wire. if you're going to go that route. Or again, another option in the flexible leader line is going to be your 175-pound 49 strand as well. Those will work great with any of those baits we talked about. Your minnow baits for twitching or pulling or ripping, your glide baits, big heavy glide baits, or your dive and rise jerk baits. So those are a few options that are available to you. Now, we talked a little bit about the connection, solid ring versus snaps. One other thing I'd like to mention to you guys is to think about in the fall is getting in the habit of changing out these snaps on your leaders. If you're using snaps, change those out more often. If you're changing them out regularly, you're not going to have a problem with the snaps. If you stick with a quality snap like a Stringies brand Stay-Lock snap, which in my opinion are the best out there on the market, and you're switching those things out often, you're not going to run into a snap problem. I typically am changing them out every couple days. That might be a little bit of overkill. You know, if you're doing it every trip and changing out that snap, you're going to be doing yourself a favor to help eliminate any sort of failure with your terminal tackle. So one of the nice things about our leaders that we make is we crimp our fluorocarbon leaders, and as you can see, there's a nice loop on there with space where that has the freedom to move around. One, it gives the lure an ability to get the most action out of that lure you're going to get, but also number two, what it does is it makes it easy to pop these snaps off, and it still have your little loop there that you probably can't see on the video. Take a new snap, thread it through, and you're ready to go with a fresh snap on there. You didn't have to invest in a whole new leader. Same goes on the wire. They're very easy to switch out. You got your loop on there, so you can just pop the snap open, pop it off, and you can thread a new one on there in a matter of seconds. I like to carry out in the boat with me, keep it in a boat or my boat bag, a terminal kit that has all different size snaps, split rings, everything I'm going to need to have to repair a leader or make sure I'm switching out those snaps often enough to where I do it without even thinking about it now, and I'm eliminating the possibility of failure by doing so. So guys, that's what I got for you in a line of leaders and matching them with some lures for the fall. Hope that helps you out. Hope that you guys helps you put some fish in the boat as well as avoid having any potential problems. If you like our video, please subscribe to our channel, and you can find all of our terminal products on our website at www.stealthtackle.net. Appreciate you guys checking us out. Good luck out there this fall, and be safe on the water. Thank you.